In this video, we're going to talk about some of the latest updates regarding hacking your Sega Megadrive or Genesis Mini. This is Steve from Restalgia, and let's get started. Hey guys, so before we get started, I just wanted to say thank you guys for the tremendous support on the last video. It is greatly appreciated. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please go down, subscribe to the channel. It makes a huge difference and it helps the channel out a huge amount. So thank you guys again, and let's go ahead and jump into this. So there's been a lot of excitement about my previous video talking about where the developers are in the world of hacking the Genesis Mini or the Megadrive Mini. As you can see, they have developed the project name, which is going to be called Project Lunar, and the artwork is really nice. It kind of gives you that classic Sega feel, so definitely kudos to them on that. It just looks really sharp. But obviously you guys are here for some of the updates, so let's go ahead and just jump into that, and we are just going to chat about those things. So right now we are on the Mod My Classic website. I will leave a link to this website in the description down below for you guys to go ahead and check out yourself. They are going to be posting any updates on this site, so as they come out, I'll be given a little bit of a heads up so I can create videos and update videos and things like that. But this is already live, so you guys can go ahead and check it out and read for yourself. So we're just going to go ahead and jump right on into this. So the first section is talking about the underclocked SOC. So it says, this has been talked about online a lot since we posted about it, so just some clarifications and facts. The system on a chip is either a rebranded or a clone of the Allwinner A33. The A33 is the same system on a chip as the Allwinner R16 or A23. And that's the same SoC that was used in the NES Classic or the SNES Classic. So what we're seeing here is the SoC is more or less a clone of the same chips that are in the SNES and NES Classics. The max rating for the Allwinner A33, A23, R16, all of them combined, is 1.5 gigahertz, quad core with a maximum voltage of 1.5 volts. So they've got some data sheets down here just to show you guys. Here's the spec sheet. If I click on it, we're just going to go ahead and pull it up. It's there for you. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but you can more or less see exactly the voltage ratings, clock speed ratings, things like that. So I'm just going to go ahead and back on out. It says the current clock scaling governor is set to performance, but it's clocked at about 1 gigahertz. The config actually states that the SoC scaling max to be 1.3 gigahertz, which would be the same as what is on the Super Nintendo Classic and the NES Classic, but it doesn't actually reach that limit. The boot clock is set to 1 gigahertz, and it doesn't ever reach the 1.3 gigahertz limit. And this is shown here. I showed this picture on my previous video. But that's essentially them running an internal stress test on the CPU to kind of see what its limits are, and it never goes over that 1 gigahertz benchmark. So it says the bottom line is that we don't know exactly why they did this, as the 1.3 gigahertz is well within the theoretical safe zone of the chip, and the power draw on the SoC should be well within safe limits as well. The config also states the max frequency clock should be at 1.3 gigahertz, but it never ever clocks up to that. So they're saying that they hope that they should be able to fix this with the hack, so it at least mimics the same performance as the NES or the SNES Classic. And they're also saying that there's going to be a bunch of performance tweaks that they're going to be making when the hack is made available. And of course, they will be made optional. So this should help with current emulation issues due to performance bottlenecking, things like that. Another thing that they've mentioned here is that they are looking to set it up so that way you can launch a different Sega Genesis emulator from the stock UI, which should perform a lot better than the current one does. Now, this is another thing that's been coming up. It says there's only 256 megabytes of RAM. Is that a problem? And the answer is yes, but not entirely. So what they're going into is they're talking about the way that the emulator and the UI works. And it just essentially says the way the emulator and UI work right now is that it effectively decrypts and decompresses the assets directly into volatile memory, and this is also a potential bottleneck. However, there are some things that we are working on to overcome this and tweak the RAM configuration, and what they're looking into is tweaking some things so that way they are able to get the most out of the RAM that they can possibly get. The next thing is actually something I'm really glad that they touched on, because the number of comments where people are specifically asking, hey Restalgia, hey Steve, do you know if this is going to be able to run 32X or Megadrive CD games or anything like that? And of course the answer is yes. As stated before, we will look into launching of different Sega emulators from the stock UI, which will allow the running of 32X and Mega CD games. This will be powered by PicoDrive likely. PicoDrive is a really awesome Sega emulator or core, and it works really well for the 32X and Sega CD, things like that. The next question is, can you run your own apps /RetroArch / other emulators on it? The answer is yes. They actually did this a couple days after release. They were able to test out their boot programs. So they were able to get RetroArch running on the console, and it is effectively the same as the NES and SNES, and it'll use the same cores as well. Now they do mention here, it says we set up a specific Sega Megadrive Mini build target which builds the cores and RetroArch against the Sega Megadrive libraries, which all pulls directly from the console for good measure. And then it says this brings us nicely to our next topic. The Sega Megadrive Mini appears to be capable of 1080p. Now don't get too excited here. We don't actually know if the console can output in 1080p, and if it can output in 1080p, how much that's going to affect performance. So it says it appears there is a downscaling service on the console that is responsible for downscaling down from 1080p to 720p. This is different from what we've seen on any of the other classic systems. As you guys know, the SNES Classic, the NES Classic all run natively at 720p out of the box. Technically, the SoC is capable of 1080p, but we have no idea how well emulation would run at 1080p instead of 720p. And what they're saying is that they have an assumption that it will not run very well. So although it might be possible to output 1080p, we may never want to output 1080p. So as you can see here, this is just a screenshot of them running one of their test apps, and it is using a 720p image as well as the full screen settings below. Right now, it is unknown at this time how well the system would perform running at such a high resolution, or if it's even something that is feasible, but an interesting find nevertheless. This is really interesting because if there is a way to tweak the performance of this device to output in 1080p, you'd be able to play your games in very high resolution, and it would look really nice, especially since it appears that the console is natively 1080p. Now again, I'm not holding my breath for this. Running in 720p is perfectly fine. I mean, we're dealing with 16-bit games here. I don't know how much energy they should really dump into that, especially since running at 720p is totally fine in my opinion anyways. So the next section is where it says potential cut Megadrive music player and intended ROMs discovered. So Cyanic is one of the developers. He was digging through and he found something that looked like some sort of an index that had some cut music player information. And essentially what that would have been is it would have taken a bunch of different tracks from the different games, and it would have been able to play it almost like a virtual CD player, so to speak. You'd be able to jump into that and just have some music playing in the background if you weren't actually going to be playing your Sega Genesis or your Megadrive Mini. Now, they sent me some of the files. I haven't actually dug through it to see any specific ROMs that may or may not have been intended for the console, but this is what gives them that idea, because there appears to be some audio tracks that are for some games that aren't on any of the versions of the Genesis Mini. So that would indicate that there was obviously additional ROMs they were hoping to have on the console, and perhaps they ran into licensing issues, but I'm not 100% sure. So it says you can check it out for yourself here. I've got the file right over here. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it. It is a very long file. You're going to need quite a bit of time to filter through, but as you can see, they've got the different titles of the different games, and then if you scroll on down, I mean, there's tons and tons and tons of tracks, different songs and things like that. So I'm not 100% sure. I haven't had the time to filter through, as I've said, but if you guys want to, you can feel free to and see if you can find something that is in there that probably shouldn't be. So we're going to jump on back. And this is something everybody has been asking. When is this hack coming out? What's going on? Why is this video only talking about a hack and not showing me how to do a hack? Well, that's because this console just came out. There isn't an estimated time of arrival yet. Progress has been a little bit slow, and the reason for that is because we've got some of our developers in different regions of the world. So some of them have Genesis Mini or Megadrive Mini, and some of them haven't received theirs from their order yet because it hasn't been released. So we're kind of in this weird cycle where half the developers have what they need, the other half doesn't. Now, we've got apparently some very, very generous people who were able to contribute to get some of our other developers a Japan model of the Megadrive Mini, and that should hopefully come up in the next few days, and that'll give the developers a little bit more of solid ground to work on since they'll actually have a device physically with them. So whomever it is that donated and helped them out to get additional units, you guys are very kind. Thank you very much for doing that. You're helping the entire community by doing that, so big shout out to you. It says, we now have all the components we require for the hack and have set up all of our remote build environments and automated DevOps for the project, meaning that we are now in the process of testing and putting together the injector and payload. So the next paragraph just goes on about letting us know that they've had to make some educated guesses and done some reverse engineering in order to kind of get where they are. They've made some good success by reproducing the kernel in the U-boot and are putting together a custom flash image and testing it. The next section is just what you can expect. We are still posting stuff on the development channel, so make sure you jump on the Discord to make sure you are kept up to date with stuff. You can also ask any questions about development there as well. So the link to the Discord is there. It's discord.me/MildMyClassic. I will leave a link in the description down below, so you guys can go ahead and jump on into it and join that Discord. Now they're asking, please don't ask for dumps of the console, ROM dumps, any of those things. That is copyrighted material. It is against the law for them to distribute that. They will not do that. You will not get those files, and it's not something that you should ask for. They only provide free to use software, and they don't distribute copywritten material. Additionally, they don't intend to rush this project, and it'll be made publicly available when it's ready. We had some issues with BleemSync when we were getting close to BleemSync 1.0, and that's partially because of the YouTubers that were involved, myself included. There was a lot of hype. They ended up pushing the product out before it was 100% ready, and there was a lot of people on the development team that didn't feel it was the right move. So what they're going to do this very methodically. They're going to take their time, and they're going to make sure that whatever is released is done properly. And these guys know what they're doing, so I have full faith in them. I don't care if it takes a month, 2 months, a week, whatever it happens to be. I'm willing to wait for them because these guys know what they're doing. So this might mean that constant updates might become fewer, but development on this, as well as our other projects, is 100% in motion. Next, they just want to say they want to thank all of you for your patience and continued support, and they're setting up an internal group YouTube here. So there's a link there. You can go ahead and jump onto that. Make sure to give them a follow. They will be posting videos of stuff on here moving forward, and it will help them out quite a bit. But that's pretty much it for this in terms of the update. Thank you guys very much for watching. As I mentioned earlier, subscribe to the channel. I will be one of the YouTubers that are going to be covering any of the tutorials related to the hacking of the Genesis Classic, as well as I do a whole bunch of other stuff on my channel with retro video game mods, some modern day modding. We're going to be getting into some custom computer builds as well, so just lots of fun stuff happening on the channel. Thank you guys so very much for watching. Be sure to give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll talk to you guys again real soon.